For me, no, this isn't a very busy week. Voters are voting. Or more accurately, 4 out of every 10 people eligible to vote are voting. Which, let's be honest, sounds less awesome. But a look back at the history of midterm elections makes one thing very clear. A majority of people who are eligible to vote don't exercise that right. All right, let's define the terms here. An eligible voter is someone who is at least 18 years old and a citizen of the United States. That's it. Pretty simple. Which is why it's so depressing that so few people vote. How few, you ask? I have the answer. Let me throw a few numbers at you. In the last midterm election, so 2014, just over 36% of the voting eligible population actually voted. That's the lowest percentage turnout in more than 70 years. In 36 states in that election, turnout went down from where it was in 2010. While 2014 was bad, it's not as though 2010 was all that much better. In that election, just over 40% of eligible voters actually cast ballots. The story was the same in 2006, 40.4%, and 2002, 39.5%. Now sidebar, presidential year turnout is higher, but it's still not even close to 100% of the voting eligible population. The highest voter turnout in the last 4 presidential elections was in 2008, when just over 58% of the voting eligible population chose Barack Obama to beat John McCain. The highest presidential turnout since World War II, that was in 1960, when almost 63% of eligible voters turned out in the race between John F. Kennedy and Richard Nixon. Sidebar over, back to midterms. The lackluster voting numbers in midterms are in spite of the fact that 37 states now offer early voting, meaning you can cast a ballot days or sometimes even weeks before Election Day. So what gives? Why do more than 60% of the people who could vote in a midterm election choose not to? Well, here are a few of the biggest reasons. Reason number 1, apathy. President Donald Trump said this one best again and again and again on the campaign trail of late. He's made clear that history suggests people just aren't as interested in voting in midterm elections as they are in a presidential race.
These are the midterms. Nobody thought of the midterms as being that big a deal. For years, nobody thought of the midterms. You know, you hear midterms, it's like, let's go to sleep, right?
All right. The reality is that human nature tends to be drawn to big productions, larger than life figures, and drama. And a presidential race packs just that sort of energy and excitement on a daily basis. Midterms don't have that one race that everyone is watching and wants to talk about. Instead, midterms give you lots and lots of smaller bore races. Now, some of those contests get to be big-ish things, like this year's massively expensive Senate race between Ted Cruz and Beto O'Rourke in Texas. But for the most part, these are not the sexiest races in the world. While control of Congress matters a lot, the casual voter tends to feel a little meh about the idea of waiting in line to vote on Election Day. Number 2 reason people don't vote, voting rules. The biggest impediment to voting is not registering to vote. And unlike some other countries around the world, like Belgium, who have much higher voter turnout numbers, the United States doesn't automatically register people to vote and require it when they turn 18, and are therefore, in our system, eligible to cast that vote. Lots and lots of people who could vote don't register to vote, and so when Election Day comes, they are left entirely out of the process. Now, there are 17 states, plus the District of Columbia, where you can register on the same day that you vote. But that means there are 33 states where same-day registration isn't available. And each of those states have specific and unique rules when it comes to how you register to vote. Here's something that's totally fascinating. If you can get someone registered to vote, there is a very good chance they will actually, vote. Studies have shown that somewhere around 90% of people who are registered to vote actually wind up voting. There are also strictures that some states put on voting, most notably voter ID laws. There are 34 states where voters have to show some sort of photo ID in order to vote. Many Democrats complain that such laws do nothing to secure elections, which is their stated purpose, and instead are simply efforts to depress turnout among non-white constituencies. The third reason people don't vote, Busy, busy, busy. Now, this is the lamest and unfortunately most common excuse people offer for not voting. In 2012, 19% of registered voters who didn't vote cited being too busy as their main reason. Now, interestingly enough, that number jumped to 14% in 2016. Guess what soared as a reason for not voting? People saying they didn't like the candidates or the campaign issues. 1 in 4 non-voters said they just hated the two candidates in 2016. USA. 2016 aside, the too busy excuse, though, has almost always been right at the top of why non-voters are non-voters. And that has something to do with the fact that unlike countries who have fought for the right to vote in our recent history, Americans often tend to simply take it for granted. Now, could 2018 break this mold? If 2016 taught me anything, it's to never, ever, ever say never. Early vote numbers have soared past where they were in 2014, and 20 million votes were cast early this election. Trump clearly believes something special is happening out there. Here's what he said at a campaign rally in Georgia on Sunday.
There have never been crowds like this, just so you understand. In the history of politics, you've never had crowds like this for midterm elections. There's never been crowds like that.
Now, Trump broke every rule of politics in 2016. Could he do the same in 2018 in bringing droves of voters out to the polls? And if those droves show up, is that actually a good thing for Donald Trump's party? And that, right there, is the point. Since it's election week, we are taking it over. Check back here for a new episode every day through Friday.